Hi, I'm Lisa Chaddock, and I'm talking today about universal design and ideas for project-based learning. We're going to go through first, what is universal design learning? Second is project-based learning. And then finally, an idea to enable students to be able to use project-based learning who maybe have some different disabilities, along with the rest of the class. So what is universal design? It is these symbols that we see. It is things throughout society that are making things more streamlined, more easy to understand, regardless of what language you speak, regardless of your disability. And this is a methodology as well of infusing our classes with a methodology that allows everyone to use the course without stumbling around or having issues. So the universal design for learning incorporates the three primary networks of how we learn. First is recognition and learning, which is the principle is that it's how we represent things. It is what we want to teach, what we want our students to learn. The second section is strategic learning, and this is action and expression. This is flexible options for how we learn and how we express what we learn. And that's a big thing here. The third thing is effective learning, which is the engagement. That's the big why. Why do we want people to learn this? And remember that with students in our age group especially, their brain is growing a new judgment center, and therefore all their information is coming through the emotional center of the brain. That means addressing the why must be imperative. You have to do this a lot because to keep them engaged, they have to have a stake in it. So ideas for this is that when you're doing representation, you need to provide for the perception, not just how we're saying things, but how it's going to be received. And therefore you have to get down to what kind of languages are you using and what kind of symbols are you putting in your coursework. So sometimes adding a symbol instead of putting the words there will make it easier for a lot of students to get it quickly. That adds to comprehension. With action and expression, think about putting a physical action to what you're doing, sort of like a hand clap or an answer back or I'm going to put my hand in the air for this answer and back down for another answer. Like I do it for deposition versus erosion. Which is it? Which is it? It's a connection in the brain. It's a physical action. This is a place too where you can infuse a little ASL language into your course, and it includes your students who use ASL and teaches like a certain letter for a certain word to represent. So this is another option. It also engages the executive functions of the brain and gives you expressive methods of using skills and fluency. So it's very strategic, it's goal-oriented, it's a lot of things involved with memorization. The engagement part of this is how you recruit interest. How do you sustain an effort and persistence? How do you get people to engage and commit? And the other thing is this idea of self-regulation, is this very purposeful motivation. How do we keep our students working toward the goal? So again, action activities are things that mean something to memorize. And again, I said ASL letters are a really good way to do this. But if you're having trouble, ask the student in your class who is DSPS, ask them for some input. Ask them, what would help you? What can we all do that is something that you would be comfortable with? So it's about the idea of looking at the curbs in your class and figuring out how can we smooth out the pathway? Can we create lessons that include rather than isolate our DSPS learners. So one idea is to do the flipped classroom. And Canvas has a lot of lessons in it, a lot of ways you can infuse your lessons with a lot of activity. You can also put in your classroom activities so that students who can't make it to class have those activities in hand. You can include project planning sessions when you're in the classroom, and on Canvas, you include their lecture and the readings. That way, you're working a lot more in the class and a lot less on lecturing. The other thing about this is you need to look at this as an activity of journaling, self-evaluation with their own plan to catch up if they feel like they're falling behind. Because a lot of students struggle with this, is they feel like they're falling behind and they don't know where they're going to go. They don't know how they're going to catch up. Sometimes asking them to journal this and then make their own plan makes them accountable, but it also gives them a clearer picture of where they're going to go and how they're going to get there. So project-based learning is one of the ways you give them options. A lot of students don't care for tests. We all know that. This is a different way to think of it. It's the way of giving students of all abilities a method to show that they can do something meaningful with what they learn, with that learned information. You start this with an essential question. What is the big question? First off, what's the big question you're answering in your class? And then break down each of these weeks of information, each unit. What is the essential question of each unit? In geography, my overarching question is how do we use geographic tools to understand human environmental interactions? That's physical geography. It works really well for me in focusing what I'm doing, but also in creating project-based learning. It's the essential core of what I need to make sure their projects address. So finding more options, videos, podcasts, coding a game. I use GIS and ArcGIS Story Map. Essays, shorts, some kind of a story prompt or a writing prompt. Having students start a club. It's a great way to get them engaged as a project. Design an event, do some kind of artwork, songwriting, performance, service learning. And then, of course, in my field of the sciences, I've been working on STEAM, which is including art into the sciences. And these are all really dynamic options that give a lot of students a different way to look at things, and maybe a way to pull them in and give them ownership. I almost never say no to an idea if it's cogent to the topic. I might ask them to focus their idea if it's too broad, or if it's too narrow, I might say, yeah, let's open this up a little. Let's talk about it. But if they come to me with their heart, saying, this is what I'm passionate about, let's see how it fits. The biggest thing a lot of my DSPS students struggle with is time and organization. And this is a flipped way of doing things, is to allow students to plan the due dates. There are still due dates. I don't erase due dates. There is an end to the semester and these projects need to get done. But how do they look at the due dates then and gauge their own process and progress? And this is what I use, is I use a Scrum board, and this is a tool that's used throughout industry. So once they learn this methodology, it is going to carry them over into their professional life. You can see that this has what is my to-do, what is my task, who's doing it. And as you've outlined, you go first through and you outline all of the tasks to do for your project. And then with the group work, you have a student pull off a task, put their name on it, and put it in the doing slot. And that way, everyone in the group can see what someone's doing and that they still have that task. When they're done, they move it over to the done area, and that can show you visually that you're making progress. So it's a very strong tool, especially for students who start to feel overwhelmed. You can look at it and say, look at all the progress you've made. You can look at these tasks. Let's see which one we need to do next. Let's put them in order. Let's see what needs to be done. It really gets things moving, but it also gives your students the control they need. And it gives them some flexibility on those due dates, is that they're getting the tasks done. Some students are going to race right along and get a lot of things done. Some are going to have some issues, but you're going to see where they are at all times. There is Scrum software. Rumor has it the district does have Scrum board. I have not been able to get it yet, but I'm still working on it. So the thing is, the Scrum software is there. There are a lot of free options as well, but this is something that students can use on their phone. And again, in group work, they can take and move things across the board. And it works really well for showing who's doing what, because you can color code each student so that students can right away say, well, I'm yellow, so I'm moving across. The other thing is you can use Google Docs and have either Google Docs, or you can use some kind of a Google Slides, and go ahead and have things tasked. I was asked about Jamboard and a couple of other software options. There's all kinds of these options where students can work together on a project. So anything in Google Docs or in Google Drive, these are options that are great to use, and a lot of students can collaborate. Now, the other thing about doing a project is students need to journal their journey. They need to understand themselves in a lot of respects, and so that it builds this self-awareness and not excuses, which is a very social emotional learning task. But it increases their confidence as they see these pieces come together. It also identifies where they're in need of help, and they can come to you, their professor. They can go to their group and say, I'm struggling with this. We can keep working on it together, but it gives them an idea of where they are at all times. Now, you do have introverts. I've had lots and lots of students that are introverts, and not all students do well in presentation groups. So I've taken some coding courses, and it's a lot easier than I thought. And boy, a lot of my students already know this. They know how to use coding equipment or coding methods. So Tinker.com is a really good place for students to create their own game. And if it's cogent to the topic, if they can create a game that they can drop into discussion board and all the students can try it out, this is a great project for students who just would rather not be in a group. Excuse me, again, you've got code.org or Code Academy or Google CS. These are all places where students can go to learn more about coding. And again, Tinker and Google CS are both places where they can build games, they can build a website, they can build with code with these activities. The thing is that all of these things, learning group organization is a way that will carry them forward when they get into the workplace. These are great skills. So like I said, within Universal Design for Learning, learning organization is huge. So in review, we have a lot of things for universal design, and it's, for me, the best way to address different levels and different students with different DSPS needs or different needs within their languages is doing project-based learning. And to enable students to really be successful and organize and move their project forward using a Scrum and journaling are my top go-tos for organization. So I am leaving in this area, there are 3 different lesson planning worksheets that include this kind of planning, because on the teaching end of it, it does take some planning as you're laying out your activities and things. But once in place, again, this smooths it out for the whole class, not just for learners who need special design. So that's it. Go have fun with this and make it your own and have a great TSI experience. Thank you very much.